Yeah, welcome to our second session on ICT standardization within the EU Canada Week. Today we focus on Dataspaces. My name is Knut Blind. I'm responsible for the track data within the INSTAR project. Maybe next slide, please. And housekeeping. You have just realized that the webinar is recorded. We are really encourage you to come up with your questions and preferably please use the Q&A function. Sure, you can also do it via chat, but this is a little bit easier if there are so many questions, then we go through them one by one. And just to maybe increase transparency, include your organization in your name in the function here as shown on the slide. Next slide, please. I'm also head of the business unit Innovation and Regulation at Fraunhofer ISI and also professor for innovation economics at TU Berlin. And we're quite happy that together with the Digital Governance Council in Canada, this event was possible. And please, as a background, I will show you a little bit what INSTAR is about in order to provide the framework for our discussion of today. Next slide, please. Our mission is really to bring the communities of stakeholders together with like-minded partners in other regions of the world. And we have kind of 6 technology areas, and today we have a focus on data. The idea is really then to provide common vision and priorities, and in contrast maybe to the other topics like for example 5G and the one from yesterday, data, this area is a little bit different because especially in Europe, the standardization activities, especially in 2 specific technical committees, which we'll present later, have been just started this year, more or less. That means we are here in a very emerging field on the one hand, but it's also quite dynamic, and we see a lot of activities going on. That's one maybe specific characteristics of this field. The other one is a specific kind of background that in Europe the European Commission has released different regulations, and especially the Data Act requires that it's complemented by specific standards, and therefore a very important driving force beyond these activities is also there's the European Commission, as we'll see later when Etienne Sansalek will talk about also the standardization requests. Next slide, please. Officially, this is a EU-Canadian event, but there are also other partnerships with South Korea and Japan, which also contribute to these common priorities for international cooperation on standards in this field. Today, as I always said, it's on data, and the idea is really to align our interests and move them maybe up then to the international level to really kind of have a strong voice also in international standards bodies, which might be then also convincing and powerful enough to convince the rest of the world to follow our approaches and our priorities. Next slide, please. There are further events with other partners like Korea in November, and then also an IEEE event has been also already been scheduled at the beginning of November, just for information. So next slide, please. As I said, we are today at Wednesday 15th. Yesterday, I hope you really celebrated the World of Standards Day in this context of yesterday's webinar. I was attending yesterday a speech of our Chancellor, Friedrich Merz, and he also emphasized the important role of data for Europe as an important asset maybe for future competitiveness. It means there's also strong endorsement from the national level, from the German national level, that this is an important topic to push further and maybe set the standards for the future. And therefore, we are here today. Next slide, please. Tomorrow it will be about quantum. We have different speakers and since time is running, I hand over to Eric Encore from Statistics Canada. He is the Assistant Chief Statistician and also the Chief Data Officer. And I came across him also through a kind of former colleague at the Standards Council Canada, who recommended Eric to kick off this webinar today, and therefore I give now Eric the floor.
Thank you very much, Knut. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure and honor to be here. I would like to take a few minutes to talk about data. This is an event about EU and Canada on standards, but as you all know, it starts with data. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about data channels and flows, but I'll focus on the data themselves. And this is the expertise that we have here at Statistics Canada. So I don't want to be speaking too much out of my range. So that will be the focus. So I hope someone can help me with the slides because I don't have access to them here. There we go. So yeah, I want to provide a spotlight on data and a few frameworks that we have been using that are quite useful. These frameworks are sort of pseudo standards. They could be made into, but it's related and you'll see. So if we go to the next slide, this is what I want to talk about. What are some of the, I call it the constituents of the whole data world to have a fluid digital pathway, data at the center. If data files were languages, I think standards would be the translators that allow us to go from one file to the other and from one data set to the other. So standard is kind of next to data in terms of importance. And then I'll say something about frameworks, as I said, and what's next. So next page, if we look at the picture, I always say that data is at the center, but at the same time, it's at the base. So we start with data, and what I call the universal translator are standards. We need standards to be able to work with data. I mean, we can play with one data file, but the moment we want to integrate, the moment we want to link data and try to find causes and explanation, we need standards. And once we have the standards, that's when we can start doing something. And that's where we have information management through data stewardship, the management of the data lifecycle, and we need pipelines and infrastructure. That's kind of the next level. And once we have that, then we can have fun and play and unleash the power of methods and models and AI. And for that, we need expertise, people who can do that. And that's all fine and good, and people can run with that and produce all kinds of things, but it needs to be stitched together into a framework or a strategy. The frameworks are guiding how we do that, and the strategies provide a means and a direction. And as we do that, at least completely in the public sector, private, it's a bit different, but there needs to be transparency. I understand there are economic or proprietary reasons for transparency to be slightly different. But in general, if we want to have a scientific approach through all this, there needs to be transparency. And then all that materialized through leadership through events like we have today, yesterday, and tomorrow. Leadership through the work of the teams that are working together, leadership through partnerships among organizations and among countries. And the leadership is what drives everything below. So next slide. Let's focus on data. Next slide. So to avoid the proverbial saying, garbage in, garbage out, there needs to be data quality. In Canada, the Government of Canada has worked on some guidance on quality, producing a document on that last year on 9 dimensions of data quality. Internationally, there's been lots of work, in particular at StatCan, on quality guidelines for statistics. We have 6 dimensions of quality, things like accessibility, coherence, accuracy, relevance, timeliness. But when you talk about data, there needs to be a bit more, because it's not just aggregated stats, it's data themselves, hence 9 dimensions for data. And there's some frameworks that exist at the UN level. There's a UN National Quality Assessment or Assurance framework that dates back a few years that provides the means to ensure quality. To do that, there needs to be data cleaning. Sometimes people call it data editing and imputation. Sometimes people call it cleansing. Sometimes it's called data hygiene. Doesn't matter. There needs to be a process to ensure that the data is of good quality and consistent with itself. And this is part of the life cycle. Once we have that, then we can do meaningful modeling of all kinds. So next slide. That brings us to the standards, which is the next level, or what I call the universal translator. So let's talk about standard in the next page. In Canada, we have the Standards Council of Canada, who is responsible to organize it all together. One of the things that's been set up recently is the data governance, or the AI and data governance standardization hub, where there's a lot of information that is centralized, where people can find not only the standards, but the activities that are happening in terms of standards and all the related information. So that hub is on the Standards Council of Canada website and provides that link. There's, of course, the work of the Digital Governance Council, setting up standards and organizing events. That's an example of leadership, as I showed in my pyramid. In the federal government, there is a data strategy for the federal public service that was set up in 2023. It's a 3-year strategy that ends next year. And we decided as part of that strategy to focus mostly, not exclusively, but quite a bit on ensuring that there are very strong data standards across the whole federal family in the government, so that we speak the same language and we enhance the possibility and set the table for much more data access across the different departments of the federal public service. If we look beyond, this is probably nothing new to anyone here, SDMX, which is the standards for data transmission. This is heavily used by many. If I look at StatCan, this is what we use to provide information to the IMF, OECD, and when we produce our national accounting, our statistics, economic statistics, we use SDMX to make it available. And then there's some other types of standards, not quite data standards, but maybe frameworks that have been set up by the work of the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe through the Conference of European Statisticians. It says Conference of European Statisticians, but Canada is part of that group. It's a group that is similar to the OECD, but not quite exactly the same. So there's work there to better define the data life cycle in the context of statistics, production of statistics, There's a generic statistical business process model. There's a general statistical information model, and there's a management framework. So these are examples of frameworks that exist in the context of statistics. So going on to the next slide, let's talk about some frameworks that we have used, that we have developed and used in Canada. The first one is one very simple one, but very effective one, the Gather, Guard, Grow, Give for the data life cycle. I'll talk about the necessity and proportionality framework, data ethics, and then I'll conclude with a few words. So let's go to the next page. Sometimes people call it the G's or the G framework. This framework developed in Canada has actually been used by Estonia. We had a conversation in 2018 about that framework, and that's a framework that they liked and that they have used to some extent. So basically, there's data out there that we can access or produce, and we need to gather it, we need to guard it, grow it, and give it. And what is this about? We say gather because it's not quite just collection. It can be collection, it can be ensuring we have the links, it can be acquisition, but it's not necessarily bringing the data. It's gathering the information that we are going to use, which includes the cases where we would use it from where it is through some access. Guarding is all the safeguarding, ensuring the protection, making sure there's all the IT protection measures. Grow is everything we do with the data, the data cleaning, all the analysis, production of estimates, modeling, training of the models, retraining, and production of predictions and estimates. And then the give part is the dissemination, where we ensure that what is out is confidential, that we provide new series applications to use that, and outcomes information. So this is not just a statistical framework, it's a data framework that can be applied in any one context where there's data involved. Data could be pings from cell phone, it can be survey information, it can be internet web scraping, images, sound. This framework has proven to be very useful. If we go to the next one, it's the necessity and proportionality framework on next page. This is essentially a materialization of the scientific approach as it applies to data. Scientific approach is we have a question, we formulate hypotheses, then we test that, and based on the test, we get some results, and we modify or validate the hypotheses we had. That's the scientific approach. If you apply that to data, and you throw in at the same time some social acceptability and legal aspect, where everything starts with defining the necessity. For example, in Canada, in the Charter of Rights, if you want to push for some public good over some personal rights, basically a national statistical agency, what does it do? It intrudes privacy a little bit to get information such that it provides information for public good. So necessity has to be defined at the outset. And then there's a number of working parameters, the assumptions. And before we go about either collecting the information or reusing it or transforming it or web scraping or producing, using models, we can ask ourselves, the effort we put in, is that proportional to the need, to the necessity? And there we think about, are the data sensitive? Might there be something to ask, or something about kids under 18? Might there be some topics that are sensitive? Are there ethical issues in terms of accessing, producing, using that information? And then what is the flexibility of our starting assumptions? Can they be tuned or toned down to reflect what we just looked at in terms of ethics and sensitivity. And then how many iterations might we do? Do we just go ahead and do it? Or might we just do a test, a pilot, and then iterate, go to test, draw conclusions, and so on? So that's the necessity proportionality. Given the need, given the necessity, how much effort in proportion to that do we want to do? And as we do all that, you can see on the side there's transparency. We want to be transparent. So that's the necessity proportionality framework. And the last one is, next page, is the data ethics framework, which has essentially on the left-hand side, 3 parts. There's the culture aspect, a process aspect, and a governance. So the culture is making sure that there's senior management support, that there's training, and organization that want to be solid in data ethics need to put that in place. In terms of process, this needs to be integrated. It cannot be something just on the side. There might be sensitive reviews that are put in place, quality assurance, raising the awareness of the employees. And then in terms of governance, there needs to be someone responsible for data ethics. There needs to be a committee of some sort, internal or external, and some secretariat. And if you have that, then you have the ingredients. And that coupled with being transparent in what we do and making sure that all of this is in line with standards. And you can see the link in my kind of pyramids of constituents for a digital pathway. You have the standards at the bottom, and you can make sure that in the framework where you have data ethics, it links back to making sure that things are in conformity to the standards. Next page. I talked about leadership. This is stitched together with solid leadership, and I'll just conclude. I see time is flying. I don't want to take too much time. So I talked about the importance of the quality of the data. This is paramount. Efforts must be made to make sure it is quality in, and that quality is nurtured and validated and double-checked and improve as we go through the process. Standards, I'm not talking much about standards. Everybody knows about that. That's the topic of the event. I presented briefly just a sample or for you to taste 3 examples of frameworks that are quite useful in our context. The Gather, Guard, Grow, Give framework, the necessity and proportionality framework, which links the legal, the ethical, and the scientific aspects together. And then there's the data ethics framework, which is looking at not just what can we do, but what should we do, which is sometimes different. So that's what I wanted to say. Just a few pointers to the future or the present, which is going to hit us in the near future. I think we will need to make sure that the data frameworks and standards are very completely compatible with what's coming up in terms of quantum computing. This is already work underway, but it's going to change significantly things we do. But it's not out of hope. There's going to be ways out and ways to deal with that. And one of the ways that will enable us to function fluidly through the Gather, Guard, Grow, Give framework and the other ones is privacy enhancement technologies. There are ways to produce information from the data when it's at a third party and even when it's not decrypted. So estimates or statistics or modeling can happen to some extent at this time without decrypting data. And just a thought to complete this presentation, coming back maybe from the times of David Hume and John Locke and the philosophers of a few hundred years ago, can we really be sure that what our senses tell us is reality? That has been discussed quite a bit over the years. But now that we have all the data, can we be really sure that what the data holds is a good reflection of reality? We are collectively trying to approach that as best as we can, starting with clean data and good standards. But what links the data to the reality? And there needs to be enhanced theories on that and frameworks. In the context of surveys, there's the survey sampling theory that enables one to go from a sample to the population and make valid inference. But this is not general enough. We need to go much beyond surveys and statistics. It's data. How do we validly draw conclusions from parts to the whole with all the data that we have? There's a lot of work being done on that, but I think it needs to be enhanced a bit. So I'll stop here, and I would like to thank everyone for listening.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. And indeed, you provided really a more generic, high-level framework where standards are more on the bottom. Yeah, and that's nice as a starting talk. And before we go to the next speaker from the Commission, Luigi wants just to point you to a poll which enables you to come up with some assessments and priorities. Luigi?
Yes, hi everyone, thanks for joining. So we are going to launch a poll for the entire duration of the event where we ask for input on joint initiatives that Europe and Canada could implement as a follow-up of this workshop. So you're going to see the poll being launched directly here on Zoom, and eventually you're also going to receive an email. So after the event, we're also going to follow up with the link to this poll, which will be great contribution we would like to hear from each of you, given your expertise and insights. Thank you. Back to you, Knut.
Yeah, thank you. And the poll shows up where? On the bottom? No.
It should show up on your screen now.
Okay. Means here. Please, you have time also during the other presentations, because now I want to hand over to Koen Janssen, who is Policy Officer at DG Connect of the European Commission, and is one of the authors of really kind of very important papers related to data standardization, also especially in the context of the Data Act. And therefore, Koen, I give you the floor just to save time.
Thank you, Knut. Good afternoon and good morning, everyone. Yeah, I was already introduced, so let's get right into it. Next slide, please. Oh, my slides are maybe not included. Let's see what's going on. I sent them on time.
I don't know. You have your slides with you?
I should, yeah, I have them also somewhere, but maybe are they available, or should I share my screen myself? It's not clear to me.
I don't know, ISIS, because I haven't them.
Yeah, maybe if you could share the screen.
Okay, sorry. Then I need first to bring it up.
Give you.
Apologies, huh? Slowly getting there. Sorry, we didn't rehearse this, as you can see. Apologies. Let me try. Oh, almost there. Ah, still one click. Oops, what? Okay, can you see my slides?
Yes, we can.
Oh, good?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So, well, as I said, let's get right into it. my speech here will be talking about the European Trusted Data Framework, which basically is the set of standards that we are currently developing. And we have many other panelists today on the call that are working actually on this in support of the overall vision of a European single market for data. And I will start basically with giving some background here on this overall vision. Back in 2020, a European strategy for data was published, which has led in the meantime to quite some activities on the various levels that are displayed here on the screen. On the legislative level, we have seen the adoption and becoming applicable of the Data Act and the Data Governance Act. Already existing at that time was the Open Data Directive, which is addressing the sharing of data from public sector bodies and making that available for everyone. An implementing act was added to that based on the Open Data Directive that addresses specific categories of high value data, ensuring also a certain level of quality for that data and availability. 6 categories, including, by the way, statistical data are included there. And then also already well known for everyone, I guess, is the GDPR, which already pre-existed and is also still in all the efforts that were undertaken an important underlying basis for the protection of personal data. So that's on the legal legislation level. If you then look on the next level in yellow, the Common European Dataspaces lists funded initiatives that were initiated across 14 different domains, sectors and other domains of strategic interest to help boost the sharing of data. And there we are talking also about restricted data that is available under certain conditions only and not openly, freely available. The high value data sets are, of course, also an important element. They're listed there on the right. And you can see that as kind of cross-sector, cross-domain reference data that is applicable across many domains. Why this diversity? Why not one single big data space for Europe? Is because there was really clearly identified already at that time that there are different needs when it comes to the communities that need to be brought together, the kinds of use cases identified, the kind of quality criteria for the data, and also the kind of access mechanisms. For instance, for health data, it's quite different than compared with mobility data, etc. So requesting access, etc. So there is this need for diversity and focus is what you see back in these funded initiatives. And by the way, the same approach also applies for market-driven initiatives. Could be around a port ecosystem, etc. That's also considered to be part of this whole overarching vision of on data sharing. Now, in order then to have convergence and interoperability, because organizations could be active in multiple domains and multiple data spaces, we have a project, a special project called the Dataspaces Support Center, which has been gathering over the last 4 years now, best practices, creating blueprints and other materials, and also organizes knowledge transfer sessions, etc. And together with the experts active in these domains have come up with the best set of best practices, which is a very important starting point when we think about standardization. Another important element is the European Data Innovation Board, which acts as a steering committee to guide all these efforts. Then on the bottom there in blue, the technical infrastructure, it's called, it kind of contains a couple of different aspects, including standards, which will be the main topic of the rest of my speech. but also other aspects such as identification. And we're not talking here identification of citizens, but of organizations, which is an important prerequisite in establishing trust for data sharing. And also a big project ongoing on open source software for the middleware layer on data sharing. Let me move on to the next slide. I listed already earlier had these funded initiatives, and just to show give an impression here of the funded initiatives that are still ongoing and now in deployment stage. So there are many projects that will deliver over the course of the next few years. Will be live basically, and many of these initiatives. I will not go one by one on those here. I refer to the strategy of 2020. We are currently working on a follow-up strategy called the Data Union Strategy. And this was announced in the political guidelines of the commission, the new commission under the leadership of van der Leyen. And there, what is needed is really what is mentioned there is the link for AI to AI, and that we need really to further strengthen and streamline the data sharing to ensure that data is available in the light also of the competitiveness of Europe. There are two important reports that are often referenced in this context. The LETA report on much more than a market, as well as the future of European competitiveness, the Draghi report. So these are important, and they mention specifically this aspect of streamlining, simplification, and data availability. So the story continues, and a new strategy is about to be launched somewhere in the fourth quarter. Then to the standards. We have. Let me give some background. In the Data Act, in Chapter 8, and the Data Act is an important act that addresses the fairness and the accessibility of data. There, in the chapter on interoperability, an article is included, Article 33, that talks about interoperability within and across data spaces. And this is the basis for a standardization request. And in the European context, standardization request is quite a significant thing. It is basically an official request by the Commission to develop standards that then can be used to prove conformance with the requirements listed in the regulation. So the standards that we are now developing are ultimately used by the parties active in the market to prove their conformance with the requirements in the Article 33. There are also some other articles, and I won't speak about those today, but some of them are quite well known. I think if you talk about cloud switching, etc. But the focus for today is really about on data space interoperability. The article in detail contains quite some different aspects, and what you can see back in the article is kind of the FAIR principles, the findability, accessibility, interoperability, and reusability of data. You can, if you read it carefully, you see these elements back. And what is a very important other element that is also present in the article is this notion of getting to an agreement on what the allowed use of the data is. And that is really specific in the context of non-open data, that you need to get to an agreement with the data holder. The sovereignty of the data holder is very important in the whole approach. Yeah, this is the flow of the standardization request. I won't bother you with that too much, but the big message is that the standardization request has been adopted officially. So that's an implementing act, and that also the European standardization organizations, which will be, we have representatives later today, have accepted the request and the work is ongoing. Just a step back, when we talk about interoperability in the context of data spaces, what kind of standards are we talking about? Here a very simplified picture of a data space. How you can look at it as a 3 layers, governance principles agreed by the community active in the data space, services, enabling services that can help, for instance, support the identification of participants in a data space, and on other elements, catalog service, etc. And protocols, the technical protocols that make the systems of these participants talk with each other in a seamless way. And we have, by the way, experts today that can talk about this a lot better than me, so I will keep it very short. But what it supports, the data space, is basically a process that is listed here to the right of being able to discover which data is available in the market, then getting to an agreement if you're interested, hey, I would like to access that data, the negotiation step basically, and getting to a contract, and then the actual access and the use of the data. That's the primary process that's supported and optimized by the establishment of data spaces. There's more to learn about that. There is a lot of good work and materials available at the DSSC website, which is open and publicly available. And I included some links here and also later in the slide deck. If I'm going too slow, please signal if I should wrap up. But for the moment, I assume I'm still okay with time-wise.
Yeah, maybe few minutes, 3 minutes.
Few minutes? Okay, I'm getting to the closure. In the contents of the standardization request, that's maybe good to mention that at the core, as a harmonized standard, which means a standard that can be used to prove conformity with the requirements, we have placed a standard called trusted data transaction. Actually, it will be a standard that will be delivered in 3 parts, but we place that as the core. And then we have supporting technical specifications / standards. 2 of them talk about the semantics of the data, the catalog as to support discoverability. For instance, how a data space can define a catalog profile that then would be conformed with by all participants in the data space. We are seeing, by the way, already data spaces with specific profiles for their data space, for mobility and for health, etc. Semantic assets, which covers basically everything from ontologies to simple code lists, in support again of a data space. Also there we want to create a set of best practices, but I will let Diego speak to that in more detail. And then we have a standard that addresses the internal data governance aspects of participants. Work on that is ongoing as well as a maturity model on common European data spaces. And that one is meant to give data space initiatives, not only funded ones, but any data spaces initiative, a way to measure themselves against a set of criteria that will be established by the experts. So these are the 5 components of the standardization requests. And yeah, if you then project this on that slide I showed here, the picture that I showed earlier, then you can see a bit how that's supposed to work together. So we are really, I think, in that sense, looking at 2 levels. The one is the collaborations and protocols, and the other one is on the data content. And I heard the previous speaker talk about data quality, and this is something that we expect under the new strategy, the data unit strategy, to further elaborate on as well. And probably we will see some additional initiatives to further also work on data quality. I think, yeah, then I will not go to these slides, but There's more detailed information for each of those deliverables. I will quickly scroll through this. They are in the slide deck that will be shared after the webinar. Just to mention this part, I mentioned already the DSSC, which is an important pre-standardization work. Another important cornerstone is the work done by our colleagues at the Commission from the SEMIC team on semantic interoperability, in particular also on public sector open data. A lot of know-how is present there on data catalogs and on semantics and ontologies. So that work will also be taken as a basis. And then we have the European standardization organizations, but they will speak after me. And we have, of course, close alignment if you think about international, that's built in the European standardization system, a close alignment with international standards bodies, ISO, ISC, JC1, and also W3C is very prominent in the work that is ongoing. I think then maybe I can stop here and leave it to the other speakers today.
Okay.
Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Koen. Maybe you stop sharing that we can come back to the slides. Yeah, you already introduced on the one hand the data gap and then the standardization request. And now we have two speakers from two technical committees, which are currently working on really fulfilling kind of your requests from different perspectives and different parts of the request. And therefore, I'm happy to have Diego Lopez here, who is the chairman of TC Data at ETSI and also working for Telefónica. Diego, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Not. Well, the idea is that is to introduce TC Data is relatively new and is an attempt in ETSI for exploring the possibility of working of defining network services oriented to data and including data spaces as well. Can you move on to the next one? Well, and this is, as I said, this is our initiative, and we are trying to address this idea of having open, trusted, and distributed data infrastructures. Can move on. The justification is basically the data and data as a service that can be supported by networks and by telecommunications networks in particular has been something that's been in the technology radar of ETSI for a while. Basically, among other things, because the idea of exchanging data is precisely, I mean, it's in the name of when we're talking about the data network is essential. But one of the things that we have identified is as the technology evolves, there are more possibilities of consuming data and providing data in an automatic way, this is very much related to the consolidation of agent applications. Let me say that when you're talking about the agent applications, it's not necessarily what is now the agentic AI and the LLMs, etc. Is much more than that, or it includes a wider set of potential applications. And basically what you have there is a couple of main characteristics about they're able to act autonomously according to intents as is being provided by the users or the organizations that are providing them, and that are able to collaborate and select the appropriate data, use them, expose them, and share them. Normally, we associate this with AI. It's not totally essential that it's AI, but at least let me say this: it's very much regarding the relying on automation, and that need to be or naturally are going to be distributed and involve several domains, and that implies that the communication, etc., is a natural mechanism, and they have expected to be relying on the services that are provided by networks themselves. Can you move on? So with these, there was the idea that there was a number of activities ongoing in a thing in smaller groups that were more or less focusing on the providing of the provisioning of data by means of by means of a network services. And the idea would be to, I mean, the idea we had is, well, why don't we make all of them converge and use the results and identify new goals that were related with this provision of data as a network service. Well, provision of access to data. It's always the problem with this with data is that this, but and supporting a model thing and relying as well in the ongoing work on data spaces and data semantics that were there. So the idea was to make these technologies converge, work on this idea of providing these trusted, open, and distributed data infrastructures that would support the use of precisely of data spaces, as Koen was mentioning before, and I guess it will be discussed later on the following talks. And well, this was a process of discussion within the ETSI board and with the different original groups. And then the TC data as a ETSI technical committee focused on data solution was approved by the end of January. We are still trying to bring it to full cruise speed. We have a number of work items that we will discuss and ongoing work that I will try to briefly introduce later on. Can you move on, please? So basically, I'm just focusing on this idea of the open, distributed, and trustworthy data infrastructures. When we're talking about this, let me say we're trying to support autonomous use of data by agent applications. It's not only that you're writing your program, you're consuming it, etc. We're trying to go. Well, it's not probably a step forward, but it's at least providing a support that allows for open mechanisms for collaborating agent applications on the network, aligned with something that has been commented, but is these FAIR principles about making data findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable across domains and in the network, and applying a strict data governance that includes, again, it's about automating and making the different agent applications aware of the access control, being able to evaluate and decide on data consistency, and for sure enforcing data privacy preservation and in general mechanisms for accounting, for the accounting and the accountability of what happens with data. And something that is implied somehow by this is the possibility of enabling a data economy that will be fostered by the application of these new agent mechanisms at the wider possible domain and in an open way. And the idea, let me say, is about leveraging domain data spaces. The TC data is not focused on defining a particular set of data spaces or on the or even in providing support or whatever for specific data spaces. Is about facilitating that those data spaces and the ways in which those data spaces are going to be applied and exploited by these automated mechanisms in an open way. Can you move on? And we're talking about making it distributed. Our idea here is to support as much as we can data products that can be consumed across the network and offer, let me say, as a network service using decentralized management paradigms, very much focused on these ideas of the data fabric, data mesh, and relying very much on how we work with knowledge graph, what implied with knowledge graphs, and how we represent knowledge as the way in which data are going to be accessed, and providing and supporting semantic data, and trying to facilitate data integration and trying to avoid siloing and facilitating application domain mechanisms. For this, we're planning to apply technology that has been developed in IDSA and that has been incorporated in the goals of data, which is NGSILD. That is provides content information and it provides information models and APIs for doing so. Can you move on? On the other hand, we planned, and Koen was mentioning this about the semantic aspects. So the idea is that we plan to apply and to extend how ontologies can be applied for reasoning, discovering, and processing data, trying to address list, I would say, not sure if that is long or not, long list of problems that have been clogging ontology development for quite a while, and trying to identify how we can facilitate the application of ontologies. And again, the same way that there was mentioning that they were not, or TC data is not intending in general, maybe that in some niches, for example, in the telco space itself, probably we could consider this, but we are not considering the idea of developing specific data spaces or maintaining specific data spaces for specific application domains. We are not maintaining, not keeping the idea of inventing, the whole ontology that deals with everything, or even specific ontologies for particular fields. But the idea is to focus on the how methodologies, it's to provide and support methodologies for identifying this. And on this, as in the case of the, when I was talking about the information model, the idea is that we plan to apply a methodology that has been developed and is continues to be being developed within IDSA and now within TC data, which is SARAF, that provides a core ontology that can be extended according to the different application domain and provides as well some usage patterns. Can you move on? When it comes to trustworthy or trusted data infrastructure, what is especially important, and when applying governance, we believe that there are two matters that are extremely important on this. One is when we're talking about identities. And when we're talking about identities, Koen mentioned as well what TC ESI in ETS is doing with another groups with digital identities, etc. We are trying to go a little bit beyond, and we are working on the idea of talking about identities on non-human entities that are suitable to be working in the network, and facilitating this idea of the automated discovery, usage, and accountability of how data is being applied. We are starting to analyze this. We plan, for example, and this diagram that you have there is from a project in which we are participating as part of the 6G AI SNS program. And the idea is that we are analyzing how we can apply these non-human identities. And those non-human identities include, on the one hand, agents, and on the other hand as well, sources of data or even data sets themselves, and how we can apply them to automate and to explore what that non-human identity should look like. How we work with the current mechanisms like the tokens or policy agents. Can you move on? The other side of this, and as I said, we believe that for the governance involved in this trustworthiness, was something that is important is how you identify the source of data and how you identify how data has been managed and how data is being applied. On the one hand, in the first case, we're talking about provenance, is about remaining assured of how, by whom, and the freshness and the other properties of data, and so you can rely on them and you can use them consistently. On the other hand, is the idea to use mechanisms for evidence. so you can you can always keep an account or a ledger if you want, but not necessarily, we're not talking about necessarily about blockchains or whatever, but keep a ledger that is usable for auditing of what was done with which data by whom, so we can enforce, not only enforce at the beginning as we were seeing with the identities, etc., enforce the policies, but as well verify a posteriori and support a transparent access to the to data usages and applications. We have open issues. This is a matter of current, I would say, research or at least evaluation of different options we have if we want to cover and provide a consistent approach. And this you have here about well, recursion is something that is a clear challenge, and then it's about how we defined or how identifying granularity and the problem of the extreme length of signatures. And this is something that we want to limit because of the connection it has with the granularity of the different data access controls. Can you move on? So right now, and when we created TC data, this is basically the formal scope that we have, which is about develop deliverables, addressing all these aspects in terms of these distributed, open, and trustworthy data solutions applicable at the level when data is interacted with data is at rest and is stored, or when data is being processed. For sure, the idea is to collaborate with other SDOs, and as you know, when I said at the bottom, we are directly collaborating right now with JTC 25 of Sensenelecom on addressing a concrete standardization request on the Data Act from the European Commission, and we are open to any other collaboration, and that includes for sure the bodies in Canada. We will be really glad to see your plans on data governance, how you're applying, how you're matching it, and whether for you is this idea of the non-human identities is relevant as well, etc., and explore these possibilities. There is a commitment. It's one of the European standardization bodies of addressing European policy and regulatory requirements. And as I said, we are now addressing this standardization request jointly with JTC 25. We are specifically focused on aspects related to with discovery and semantic mechanisms, talking about the catalogs and the semantic methodologies. Can you move on? And finally, apart from this particular focus on the standardization request, we are trying to move forward with these technical standards that I mentioned before, NGSA, LD, SARF, to support data interoperability and semantic mechanisms. We are working on precisely making them converge and relating the different elements that were at in the origin of what TC data is, regarding, for example, distributed ledgers, semantic models, maritime communications, etc. We are starting some interesting collaborations because when talking about all data, with, for example, with TC within ETSI, with TSCSI on digital identity, and we are starting to talk about how to deal with retained data when it comes to data that has some legal implications, and in particular when it comes to lawful interception of communications. That is something that being ETSI, a telecommunications body, is really relevant. And we are analyzing, for example, and trying to collaborate with 3GPP that this has become concerned about this, they are thinking about how the mobile network architectures could imply the access to third-party data by this kind of agents that we were mentioning before. And for sure, I mentioned SAREF and NGSILD before, and something that we have we approved recently is about the supporting the idea of having demonstrated deliverables. Is an experience that we studied in ETSI in other groups some time ago, and we are trying to import this in TC data as well. The idea is to have a framework for executing proofs of concept and interoperability events that help us or can help us in, on the one hand, identifying future ways by practical demonstrations of certain results, future ways for working in standards on the one hand, and second, somehow guide us in precisely which are the gaps or ambiguities that some standards may have and that may cause some problems with the goal of interoperability, that is the main goal for standards at an early stage. We have these, as I call the demonstrative deliverables, are extremely interesting for getting this, this idea of early interoperability and to involve results from research bodies, etc., for research activities that can be extremely interesting in guiding as well the standardization activities. And from my side, that's all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Diego. I think we continue and give Sebastian the floor. Then we have both kind of technical committees in Europe working on the topic, and especially then also responding to the standardization request. And then maybe afterwards, if there are some questions to this block, we can discuss them then together. Sebastian, floor is yours.
Thanks a lot. Good morning, good afternoon. I hope you can hear me well and can see my slides. So then let's get into the gist of it. I would like to complement what was said by Diego before on ETSI data, and especially by Koen's presentation on the European standardization activities. So what's the take of JTC 25? So CEN and CENELEC. It's a joint technical committee between the two European bodies, CEN and CENELEC, on data management, Dataspaces, cloud and edge. Of course, let me go to the next slide. We have a title and a scope, and I will not read it out loud, but of course we are working on data management, Dataspaces, cloud and edge. And of course we have a focus on standardization activities in that area especially. Please also note that we have written here interoperability, portability and switchability, which is not too much a data space topic, but a cloud topic as well. So, and I will only mention this here and once. We have also the part of cloud and edge in our scope, which is, for example, subject of Article 35 of the Data Act. So it is far more than only data spaces and data management. We're also focusing on the cloud and edge topic. Therefore, we have 4 working groups in our JTC. Our advisory group that carries on the work of our focus group, does some analyzing and landscaping and interaction work to support the content-driven work in the JTC. We have a working group on Dataspaces, a working group on data management and governance, and we have a working group on cloud and edge. And as you see, especially from our conveners, we are really a real European committee with a broad European participation, and that is a very important thing that I would like to underline. However, our JTC is focusing on 5 of the 7 standardization deliverables that are requested in a standardization request. We have the trusted data transaction that was introduced before already, that has 3 parts, and I will go in more details on that one in a bit. So we are focusing on that one. We have item 6, the European Start on the Quality Framework for Internal Data Governance that we are processing. And we have a technical specification on a maturity model for common European data spaces. This is the core work that we are working on. I would like to focus my presentation a lot on the key concepts and terminologies. Therefore, I introduced here one of the key figures that we have in the Trusted Data Transaction Part 1, which is on concepts and terminology. And I think it's really important to understand the key concepts of the things that we're working on, because it's well depicted here in this figure. You see that we have especially two key roles in this figure in trusted data transaction. You see it on the lower part. We have a data provider on the one hand side, and we have a data user that somehow interact with each other with the purpose to use, share, and exchange data. But we also include the so-called data rights holder. So of course, we do not use the term data owner, which might be natural, but you cannot really own data. So this is always a tricky discussion. But there is someone or something that holds the right to the data. And we also produce data. We have a role of a data producer. So you see that we have really the multitude of different kinds of roles. We can talk about things, for example, that produce or consume data. We have this legal aspect of an entity, of a party that might be an individual or an organization holding the rights on the data. And we have the interaction between the data provider and the data rights holder. What is really important, especially here in the European context, because we emphasize this a lot in our work, is that before a data provider can share or give access to data, it needs the rights granted from the data rights holder. And it's important that this object, may be a consent object or any other data rights object, is always carried along with the data. So if the data provider provides the data to any kind of data user, this data rights piece must be carried with it. And this could be included if the data user gives it to another data user, and so on and so forth. This data rights object needs to be recognized, it needs to stick to the data, and it needs to be enforced, executed, whatever that may be, including obligations, permissions, and things like this. We see in the center that there is the so-called data product. This is a very important combination of the data that we're talking about. It's not only the data itself, may be exchanged, shared, or whatever, only given access to, may only be analyzed, the data itself. We talk about metadata, and especially about the things that we heard before, about its understanding, so the semantics, the meaning of the data. It needs to be carried with it. And even when it's just a reference, if you want to understand my data, please look up in this ontology, in this model, or this document, or whatever, how my data can be understood. It, of course, includes catalog information, so I can publish my data and it can be discovered somehow by someone else. And of course, it includes the data rights, however they are exactly expressed, may it be terms of use, data licenses, and we specify this in very much detail, because the most important aspect we are talking about here, which is expressed here in this figure, is exactly this process between a data provider and a data user, about publication and discovery of data. We talk about the negotiation of those data sharing agreements or data sharing contracts. If applicable, of course, there are, for example, open data where we just have a license and we don't need to negotiate, but a potential negotiation. And then the actual data exchange and sharing process, and the access and usage in the end by the data user, that the data is used and processed as allowed or prohibited in the data rights. This is an important part, and we talk about this and explain this in detail in the part 1 of the trusted data transaction. We have the part 3 on the interoperability requirements, explaining in detail how this interaction between data provider and data user really can be implemented so that the systems are interoperable. What is not well depicted in this figure is the part 2 on the trustworthiness requirements, because each and every interaction between the parties needs to be trusted. And the most relevant mechanism that we describe here is a piece with evidences and claims that are exchanged with each other. For example, with verifiable credentials, how you can connect it, for example, with DID document decentralized identifiers. This is a key concept that we describe in the trustworthiness requirements without pinning it very clearly to a technology, because we develop here a harmonized standard that should be implementable using different technologies. This is a key concept. And then let me briefly connect it to the maturity assessment of common European data spaces. When we talk about the common European data spaces, we talk about commonly accepted rules in this data space. This is what the maturity assessment is about, to understand to which degree is the data space already developed or not developed. How can I implement it? And our quality standard on the internal data governance processes shall clearly describe how a data provider and a data user can implement the required governance of a data space. And so the whole thing really connects to each other in a very good way. Let me close with the connection to the international standards, and we heard this before. So of course, our European standard that we are developing here are important for Europe, of course. However, data does not stop on borders. So not only between Europe and Canada's border, it's an international business. So what we see is that we have a very good collaboration with ISO, IEC, JTC1, ST38, where we also have an international data spaces standard. And the idea is really that our European standard shall depict the European regulations and the European way of implementing data spaces, but it needs to be fully compliant to an international data spaces standard, so that we have an international understanding what a data space is. This is our European understanding, our European spliced version of a data space that we have here in the trusted data transactions that respect European regulations in special. We have a good connection to ISO, IEC, JTC1, ST32, which is about data governance, because of course we have a very specific view on data governance in our standards, but we do not need to reinvent everything that already exists there. And of course, we have strong liaisons with a lot of other activities, and I would not go into all of the relevant details, but it's important that this really horizontal data spaces work that we have connects nicely to foundational technologies, not only in TC data. We also mentioned W3C standards, for example, foundational technologies for DID or DIDs or verifiable credentials, for example. However, we also need to connect to domain-specific standards. And I could just mention, for example, the digital product passport, smart cities and smart communities, or the whole AI world. So we really are enabling functionality with our standard for a lot of sectorial data spaces. And with this, I think I can close and hand back, I think, to Daniel now.
Yeah, thank you, Sebastian. I think now we have the complete picture from Europe, from the kind of Data Act and the interest of the Commission, and then also the responses both of ETSI and GTC 25% Senelec. Maybe one question for especially our Canadian friends and partners is, because if we now a little bit reconsider the presentation we have seen, is that maybe on the bottom of the framework Eric presented, I think we are having the same interests and problems and challenges, but the frameworks are a little bit different, because I think in Europe we have this very strong drive by the Data Act and the requirements. And therefore, my question maybe for the last session then is whether Canada sees maybe some opportunities to contribute, to collaborate, or whether maybe the just mentioned international level Sebastian showed is maybe then the level to collaborate with the European partners. But this is just a question for the end. And since time is running and we have 3 presentations left, I give Daniel now the floor. And if there are other questions by others, please use the Q&A section to put them up, and we can also discuss them later in the final remaining minutes. Daniel, the floor is yours, and 15 minutes would be nice if you just kind of
yes, I will
keep this limit. Thank you.
Can you hear me, right? Okay, I will try my best. So good morning, good afternoon, everyone. And yes, exactly. So I think my presentation will complement what was presented before by Sebastian, Koen, and Diogo. Here I am representing 2 organizations. On the one hand, the Big Data Value Association. We are an European industrial non-for-profit association fostering AI and data-driven innovation in Europe, working very closely with the Commission in different partnerships. But I am also here representing the Dataspaces Support Center that was mentioned by Koen before. This is a coordination and support action funded under the Digital Euro program, giving support to all the European Common Data Spaces that could show before in the slide. So this is what we are doing in Dataspaces Support Center, and let me start with the project. Okay. So again, we are
maybe. Sorry, Daniel, because
yes.
we cannot see the appropriate slides on the slide. Maybe.
Okay, but what slide are you seeing now?
The presentation of the next section.
But can you see my slide?
Yes, now it's the correct one. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so I started with the Dataspaces Support Center. Again, this is an action that is giving support to all the common European data spaces in Europe. And of course, as you can imagine, standardization and interoperability is key for this project and for a different perspective, because we think that standardization is key for scalability, adoption, but also for compliance and also sustainability. We are also addressing interoperability from different dimensions, as you can see here, data interoperability per se, talking about vocabularies, ontologies, metadata, and so on. Also interoperability within the data space, talking about data governance, catalog and agreements, but also interoperability between data spaces. Okay, and for that, we think that the alignment with standards, both at European and international level, it's key for that. Okay. So this is a very simple picture, but I think it summarizes pretty well what the project is doing. On the one hand, the project is talking with the projects working on this arena, on the data spaces. So we are seeing that there are already cross domain standards, but also the need of domain specific standards. There are also many use cases already deployed that we should take into account, and also existing technologies, implementation, and so on. And on the other hand, we are, as we are seeing today, bringing from the upside, from the formal bodies, the Commission and the SDOs also, different regulations that were mentioned before, the different standardization requests coming from the Commission, different standards existing, but also new standards. So what the project is doing, this is exactly how the project plays into the picture. So this is our project in green. So we have the different regulation coming from the Parliament, okay? The Data Governance Act, the Data Act. Also, it proposed to the European Commission and also the European Data Innovation Board that was mentioned by Kuhn before, some standardization requests to implement exactly those regulations, and then those standardization requests are brought to different standardization bodies in Europe. Here it was mentioned today, Sensenelec, GTC25, but also ETSI. And this is where our project comes into the picture. So in this way, we establish liaisons with some of those bodies. And based on the assets that the project is developing, our blueprint, our different building blocks, taxonomies, and standards, and so on, we contribute as a liaison to those different bodies, and also we contribute also as observers to this European Data Innovation Board that was mentioned before. Also, the project provides inputs to other initiatives, for instance, the high-level forum and also the multi-stakeholder platform. So all in all, our project is trying to bridge this gap between the real implementation projects and also all the bodies and also all the initiatives working on this domain. Okay. What the project is doing in more specific way and is based on 4 pillars. On the one hand, we are working with all the European Common Data Spaces projects and collecting the different standards that are applying on their specific sectors and also in the different fields. So we are addressing all the pillars about data sharing and data spaces, but also all the sectors that Kuhn mentioned in the previous picture, where you saw all the 13, 14 sectors represented by the data spaces. So we are collecting all those standards. Then we are also in our blueprint and our different building blocks, we are also identifying some key foundational standards that should be at the basis of all the data spaces. We are also collaborating with different bodies that some of them were mentioned today before, but also with others. So we are also producing a whole plan where we are liaising also with those bodies. And finally, as mentioned before, we are also contributing to different European standards initiatives, for instance, the high-level forum and also the multi-stakeholders platform that was mentioned before. And in this way, for instance, we have also contributed to some of the reports that this high-level forum has produced also in the past. In the case of collection of standards, as mentioned before, we have worked with all the European Common Dataspaces, and we have collected now up to 130 standards, again, addressing all the sectors where those projects are working, but also addressing the different aspects that affect data spaces and data sharing. And here you can have a glimpse of the different the distribution of standards in the different domains. For instance, we have the majority on data sovereignty and data interoperability, and also if we go to the more granular perspective, we can see on the right side of the slide that there are several where we have the standards in the different domains of the when we talk about data spaces and data sharing. Here you have the link, so if you go to the web page of the project, you will see all the whole list of standards that we have collected, and you will see again that we are covering different domains, but at the same time different aspect of data spaces. Okay. But we are in the project, we are not only reactive. So on the one hand, we have collected all those standards, but on the other hand, we have also identified where from the project we can also collaborate. So in this way, we have established, again, as mentioned before, liaisons with some SDOs. In this case, with the W3C on the working group on dataset exchange, because we are contributing with our knowledge, our assets to the development of the DCAT protocol. Okay. We have also established liaison with the Sensenelec JTC25 that was previously explained by Sebastian. So in this way, with the project, we are contributing in different aspects, but more specifically, we have in the project delivered the so-called data spaces maturity assessment that now is being used in JTC25 as a starting point to deliver some of the technical specifications, and it has not been fully confirmed, but we are also planning to establish a liaison with ETSI, the technical committee working on data, also to contribute from the Dataspace Support Center on the ontology and also the cataloging part. So as you can see here, we are somehow closing the cycle, okay? Again, reaching both the work that is being done at the higher level on the regulatory and also standardization bodies, together what we are collecting from different projects and the different data spaces working on the field. Also, as mentioned before, we have also identified in the project a few key technical standards that we think that the data spaces should take into account when designing and deploying data spaces. The three of them are part of the World Wide Web body. One of them is the Open Digital Right Languages, okay, which is basically used to define policies. And in this way, we are proposing this standard again to define policies in the different building blocks of data sovereignty and trust. We are also proposing to use verifiable credentials as is defined in W3C, also to define and to explain verifiable credentials and to exchange with others. And finally, W3C DCAT, data catalog, also used to describe, also metadata used to describe data sets in the data catalog. So we are proposing these three standards as part of our blueprint. And again, as you can see, very much related to the work that is being done in the different SDOs that were explained before. Also, on top of those standards, we are also recommending some protocols. The one of Dataspace protocol, DSP, which is produced by IDSA, and it is divided in three parts: how datasets are deployed in DCAT catalog. So it's the catalog protocol, how agreements can be established, the contract negotiation, and finally, how datasets are accessed using transfer process to the transfer process protocol. Okay. On top of that, we are also recommending a couple of standards to exchange credentials between the different participants in the data space. Again, all this information can be found in our webpage, where again the standards, those protocols that we are proposing are also described. But if we go, for instance, to the blueprint, and here you can see the technical building blocks that we in the project we are using to cluster capabilities in different data space, you can see that the whole pillar is devoted to data interoperability. And I will not go into the detail, but again, for this data interoperability, we have three building blocks that can be used to foster interoperability in data spaces. The first one is data models. And here in data models, we address semantic interoperability. So we are proposing how ontologies, vocabularies can be created, can be managed, and can be stored and also shared. Also, we are addressing the whole data exchange part, which is about the data plane of the data space. And here is everything capability related to the real exchange of data. And finally, we have another building block addressing provenance and traceability. This was mentioned in the first presentation of today, and here we are proposing how to be sure that all the processes and all the transactions in the data space are appropriately stored and stored in the data space. Okay. Finally, regarding the Dataspace Support Center, I wanted to announce that we have launched these so-called Dataspaces Awards that are very much related to this maturity assessment that was mentioned before. I think it's a very good initiative. This is organized by the European Commission and the Dataspace Support Center, and here we want to award those dataspaces that are in a high level of excellence in the one hand, but also the most innovative one. So if you are interested, you can apply because you have still time until the 7th of November, which is the deadline for these awards. Okay. Again, this is very much related to the maturity model for Common European Data Spaces that on the one hand we have produced as part of the DSCC, but also is part of some of the standardization efforts performed in JTC 2025. And now my final slides are about BDBA, the Big Data Value Association, because as mentioned before, we are fostering in Europe data and AI-driven innovation, and of course, interoperability and standardization are key for us. And here in this slide, you have a snapshot of the different activities that we are doing on interoperability. So we are working, for instance, with CEMIC, that was also mentioned before, on how LLMs can be applied to support semantic interoperability. So we have run several workshops together with CEMIC, and we have produced a nice report that summarizes the state of the art when we apply LLM and AI agents to support semantic interoperability. We have also produced several papers where we discuss about the use of metadata to support interoperability in data spaces. And also we have run several workshops with other associations. And here you have an example of some workshops that we run together with IDSA and other associations. We are also working on this concept of AI-ready data products that somehow brings together AI and data aspects together in the so-called data product paradigm to prepare data products to be used by AI application and practitioners. And also very tangible use case, we are also using all this knowledge to support the connection of the AI factories and the data spaces and data labs, what we call the so-called data challenge. So all those activities we are doing in BDBA, okay, I will pass very quickly this slide, but just to highlight that we have a dedicated task force on standards, where we are addressing standardization in data spaces, NAI, virtual worlds, and digital twins, and also we collaborate with some initiatives in Europe, ICT, ADRA, the Working Group on Standards, and also DSCC, as mentioned before, and the OpenVerse project. From BDBA, we have established liaisons with different bodies. Some of them were mentioned today. For instance, we have established a liaison with JTC 25, the one chaired by Sebastian, but we have also established a liaison with the JCT 21, artificial intelligence. And here I want to highlight exactly this dimension, JTC 21, which is not only about data, but how data can also be brought together with AI. At the end of the day, this committee is responding to the request of the Commission for the AI Act. And as you can see here, that these requests have several aspects, and I want to highlight the aspect of data governance and data quality, because the technical committee has a dedicated working group to work with data bias, data governance, data sets, and data quality. We from BDBA also contributing to this aspect that somehow brings together the view from data and AI. Okay. This committee, in this case, there are two projects that I think are also interesting for this meeting today: quality and governance of data sets in AI, and concept measures and requirements for managing bias in AI systems. Again, I think that not mentioned before, but this committee is again bringing together AI on the one hand, but also data in this regard. Okay. And this is my last slide. I wanted to invite all of you to the event that we are organizing in Copenhagen in November, from the 12th to the 14th of November, where we will continue the discussion on all these aspects: data, data sets, data sharing, data spaces, AI, standardization, and interoperability. So if you happen to be here there in Copenhagen, we invite you to continue the discussion and to exchange our views on that. And that's all from my side. Nukt, I think I was in time, so I will have a look to the chat if any question is asked there.
Daniel, I think this shows on the one hand the complementarity of what you are doing with the other TCs from Etsy, and especially also the GTC 25% Zenlec. On the other hand, you also then mentioned the AI Act. INSTAR has also a task force on AI, which also shows then that it's a little bit difficult to disentangle the different areas. There are points. Finally, nevertheless, at the end, you came back to the issue of data quality, for example, which has been also a key point of Eric's presentation at the very beginning. That means
Exactly,
here
yeah.
we come back to the common ground. We have two last speakers, and I'm quite happy that we have also now a second Canadian representative with us, Daryl Kingston, who is the Executive Director of the Digital Governance Standards Institute of Canada, who gives us a second kind of perspective from the Canadian side on the topic. Daryl, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Welcome. Good morning, good afternoon. Again, I'm Daryl Kingston. I'm the Executive Director of the Digital Governance Standards Institute, part of the Digital Governance Council here in Canada, and I'm calling in today from Spencerville, Ontario, the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin. Just want to say before I get started, thank you for the invite to take part today. I have found this extremely informative and have appreciated the time so far this morning. So next slide, please. Just quickly, what I hope to touch on today during my brief remarks, you can see here. Next slide, please. So in January of 2024, 1,500 Canadians were surveyed regarding trust dynamics when sharing their data. As you can see here, the results were not that great. Fraud, obviously, for credentials is skyrocketing. Interoperability across provinces remains a huge problem here in Canada. Trust is a foundational requirement. Data providers and consumers have to be able to interact securely. So this is something, as we kind of think about what we need to do to move forward together, it's essential that we get the trust right. Next slide, please. Just quickly about us, for those who might not be aware, the Digital Governance Council is Canada's not-for-profit member-led organization that acts as a cross-sectoral neutral convener for Canada's executives to come together and share best practices, identify digital governance issues, and then prioritize collective action that they may want to take. The Council's membership cuts across all major sectors of the Canadian economy, both public, private, as well as not-for-profit, and harnesses the collective expertise and action of Canada's executives to propel Canada forward as a digital-first nation. More specifically, we have three streams of activity, one being we lead an executive forum for council members. We're an accredited standards development organization by the Standards Council of Canada, meaning that we can publish and develop standards that are national standards of Canada. And then we certify organizations in the management of the effective and efficient use of digital technologies. The aim obviously being to strengthen the trust and confidence of Canadian people, Canadian businesses, and governments in Canada's digital economy. Next slide, please. So just to share a little bit around perspective on data collaboration. So data sharing and the development of data spaces covering interoperability, maturity, and trusted frameworks have quickly become core priorities. Across Europe and Canada, we've seen important progress. There are many new initiatives that are demonstrating how trusted, sovereign, and interoperable data infrastructures can be built. These efforts show us that data spaces are not just technical constructs. They are enablers of economic growth, innovation, and public trust. Data is more than a technical resource. It's a strategic asset that underpins innovation, inclusion, and trust. So as we engage internationally, our goal is to align with partners like the EU while also ensuring that collaboration reflects our Canadian values. We see international cooperation as essential for interoperability, knowledge exchange, and economic resilience. Next slide, please. So a crucial part of this work has to be interoperability. I was at an event last week that we helped co-host, if you will, at the Senate chamber here in Ottawa. We had one speaker who spoke about interoperability, being politics at its highest level. It was really fascinating. Without it, data spaces remain fragmented and their potential remains unrealized. Achieving true interoperability requires a combination of technical standards, governance models, and then a shared maturity framework that allows participants, whether they be from the public sector, the private sector, or civil society, to engage in the system with confidence. In terms of priorities, Canada is particularly interested in advancing interoperability that ensures data has shared meaning across borders. We are also focused on trusted frameworks for governance, consent, and accountability. We also need to ensure that data use reflects sovereignty and values that are core to Canadians, like fairness, transparency, and inclusion. And finally, collaboration must support responsible innovation, balancing economic growth with privacy and protection. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, DGSI, Digital Governance Standards Institute, we are a Standards Council of Canada accredited standards development organizations. We develop national standards in the digital space, things like data governance, cybersecurity and privacy, digital trust, and identity. We recently just had one of our national standards of Canada approved through the ISO IEC PAS submitter recognition process and become recognized as an international standard for data collaboration framework, zero copy integration. We feel the focus of collaboration should be on mutual recognition of standards and to highlight standards in data sharing governance space. We see collaboration best achieved through practical pilots and test beds where ideas can be proven in real-world contexts. Pilots that test technical compatibility, but also differences in governance, interpretation, and implementation. Public-private partnerships are key to bridging regulation with innovation. As something unique that Canada brings to the table is the Indigenous approaches to data governance, which emphasize community control, stewardship, and respect for cultural values. This is a perspective that we can bring that enriches the global dialogue where we participate. Next slide, please. Equally important is trust. Trusted data frameworks, including clear rules for transactions, permissions, and accountability, will ensure that data is not only shared, but that it is shared responsibly. The trust element is what underpins adoption, scalability, and long-term sustainability. If you draw back on one of my earlier slides, trust is not at an all-time high and thus needs to be earned through the actions that we take. There are several natural areas where the EU and Canada can deepen cooperation. One is trusted data frameworks, including consent management and contracted modules for accountability. Another might be building interoperable data spaces in shared priority sectors, perhaps health, mobility, or the environment. We can also exchange approaches to maturity models and capacity building for data governance. And together, Canada and the EU can amplify a joint voice in global fora around data, such as the G7, OECD, or the UN. Next slide, please. So just let me conclude by underscoring Canada's guiding principles. These core principles are enshrined in both countries' frameworks. We can aim for functional equivalency. They don't need to be identical, but as we discussed, interoperable. So first, trust. Citizens and businesses need to feel secure in data use. Second, value-driven. So transparency, inclusion, and equity must be central to any potential solutions that we put forward. Third, we want frameworks that are innovation ready, so able to enable AI or advanced analytics and research collaboration. And finally, we see collaboration as a path forward, building solutions in a partnership with EU and potentially other global partners. So how do we turn promising initiatives into ongoing concrete results? First, by developing joint strategies for interoperability, where standards, governance, and best practices align, and where transatlantic pilots can prove what is possible. Second, by investing in capacity and maturity, both regions can benefit from sharing expertise on how data spaces evolve over time, from early design to large-scale deployment. Third, by creating pathways for accessibility. We want to ensure that participation is not limited just to larger players, but open to SMEs, researchers, and communities, making data spaces inclusive as well as interoperable. And then finally, by embedding this cooperation into long-term frameworks, that means ensuring transatlantic governance mechanisms and trusted legal frameworks that can support continuous innovation while safeguarding sovereignty. Complementing these profiles are test beds, controlled environments where entire systems, not just individuals, devices, can be validated under real-world conditions. Our goal should be nothing less than building a trusted transatlantic data ecosystem, one that connects Canada and European data spaces, drives innovation, and ensures citizens and organizations on both sides of the Atlantic benefit from secure, responsible, and value-driven data use. Cooperative mechanisms that identify standards that can be used or leveraged in both countries provide confidence for regulators, as well as digital and economic partnership. Outcomes and objectives of mutual recognition will help build trusted digital mobility. Next slide, please. So just quickly, I know that we're passing around the slides post the workshop today. So the next 2 or 3 slides simply identify the technical committees that we have active at the Digital Governance Standards Institute. Next slide, please. So you'll see as well in the slides the catalog of standards that we have, those that are obviously the P being published, where you don't have that giant white P there, areas where we're still working and standards are in development. And then maybe if I could just have you skip down to slide 13, please. I apologize to the team running the slides here. And these are the different ways that you can contribute. So participation is open to anyone who has an interest in the subject matter. It doesn't matter whether you're, you don't need to be Canadian. We have international participants that take part in the standards that we develop. And then 3 really specific ways where you can get involved and contribute your thoughts and your expertise to the standards that we develop. By joining an expert drafting team, becoming a member of our technical committee, or just taking part in the mandated 60-day public review that is required for all of the standards that we develop. Your subject matter expertise helps us improve the overall quality of the standards that we develop and then publish as National Standards of Canada. So with that, I will close and just say thank you so much for your time and for listening today. It's greatly appreciated, and I look forward to the next speaker.
Okay, thank you. Silvia Castellví from International Dataspaces Association. And I would like to start, but it's obvious, next slide, that dataspaces have the potential to revolutionize the data sharing. But the companies that are investing in data spaces needs to be confident and assure that their investments hold value in the future. And to answer these companies, standards are very important, okay? And let me explain you in the next slide. IDSA is a non-for-profit association. and we consider standardization very important. And in our association, we have more than 119 companies contributing on our activities. These companies comes from 32 countries, and we have more than 800 people contributing to the activities, the assets that we are developing. And so what it means is that, next slide, please, that what IDSA is doing is the foundational of Dataspaces. And we started several years on describing how to implement Dataspaces with our members. So this is, our association is member driven, and we are neutral. And what we are doing is one framework for Dataspaces. And at this moment, we have more than 150 Dataspaces running. And you can find on our Dataspaces radar more information about this initiative, operational Dataspaces. Next slide. But how we develop this and how we contribute to the standard, we have tried to explain in this one slide, where you can see on the core of the slides the IDSA assets. So we have 5 core assets that are the basis that we develop with our members through different working groups, on the architecture working group or the rulebook working group certification. So we have in our members makers. Makers are cloud providers, integrators, dataspace governance authorities who develops, design, or define, or develop dataspaces, but also we have users. Those are who benefit from the dataspaces. So altogether, shared what are the challenges, what are the needs on how to develop the assets and support the development of the assets. These assets and these agreements are very important for going to the market and achieving an impact. And we cannot do this with without the support of our hubs, also competence centers, but liaisons with other partners that has been presented before, also policy makers. But what is very important, as commented before, is participating on formal standards. And I will explain you how we are contributing to the standardization activities. But first, let me, next slide, introduce you our key assets. You can find more information on our website, so I will be very brief. We have the reference architecture that defines the roles and representatives on the dataspaces, with the focus on the trust, on security and governance aspects. This reference architecture is technology agnostic. We have also the IDSA certification process to assure that the components that we certify follows the best practice and align with IDSA. Also, the rulebook that supports the operationalized and legal agreements, enabling the implementation of governance structures. This is what we call the soft infrastructure of a data space. But also we need interoperability that has been commented, that is very important, very relevant. And Daniel has commented before, the Dataspace protocol ensures seamless communication of the Dataspaces instance, okay? And then we need professionals. So we have the professional qualification programs and, of course, open source implementations. Next slide. Here you can see how IDSA, which is the IDSA standardization scope, the formal standardization scope, let's say. Next slide. We have contributed at international level to ISO 21551 that has been presented before, that established the concepts and characteristics of data spaces. And in collaboration with Eclipse, we are promoting the data space protocol that has been developed by IDSA to an international standard. We had the first release on summer 2025. We are also collaborating with W3C semantic interoperability because it's very close aligned with the data space protocol to achieve the semantic interoperability when sharing data on data spaces. Next slide, but also we collaborate with European Commission standards. We have collaborated a lot with Sensenelec trusted data transactions, and we have now drive these efforts into Sensenelec GTC 25 that has been explained before by Sebastian, so I am not going to enter in details. Next slide. So we call for action to all members, to business leaders on implementing data spaces to contribute and collaborate on a standardization. So we invite them to join IDSA and work on the adoption of the standards that we are developing and contributing to develop. And then build partnership and collaborate with us to collaborate with standardization formal bodies in order to achieve the interoperable digital economy that all together are building. So we see this collaboration with the standards very close with our members, okay? Because we are a community-driven association. And then next slide. What is important, and this is the purpose of this workshop, is the international level, okay? Not the international level of the activities that we are doing, developing on IDSA as an association. Not only aligning with international standardization efforts, we are aligning also with national standardization efforts in other countries. We have invested a lot of effort and we are aligned a lot with ASEAN countries, Japan, China, but also with South America and America countries. And this is a call also to align with Canada. And I suppose that we can continue discussing, and this is the first step for this joint collaboration. And next slide. If you want to know more about the standardization, data spaces standardization landscape, we have created a paper where we explain which are the current European and international efforts and how IDSA aligns with these activities on these efforts. So I invite you to go to the website. I will share the link. And look into, if you go to the next slide, look into the paper to know more. We also present in this paper strategic developments and outcomes that has been explained before during the previous presentation, so I will not spend time on that. And next slide. So we are working in a new paper that is a standardization paper from an international perspective. So I invite you, Darrell, to contribute, okay, to this paper and explain what you are doing in Canada, and then we can share with our community and beyond. And last slide, this is not only for IDSA, but maybe you ask yourself how to contribute to the standards. Darrell already has provided an overview how to contribute to Canadian standards, but for international level, for Europe level, if you are deep involved on data spaces, we invite you to join IDSA working groups, okay, and participate on the activities that we are developing, because we are building the specification, the needs, the roadmaps with these working groups. And also, if you want, you can engage with the standardization process phase, as Darrell explained it before, from the different committees. Look the committee that is more interesting for you. But if you want directly participate to the committees, we encourage you to join the national standardization bodies and participate to the committees. And in IDSA, we have also an IDSA standardization coordination group. It's just for members or experts. So we are building these standards all together. So I invite you to participate and contribute. Here you have my contact, next slide, the contact details that you can find on the slides. And thank you for the opportunity to present. Thank you. No.
Hi, good afternoon. Knut, are you there? Can you all hear me? Hello. Shall I start, or do you want to say anything? Maybe not. Okay, sorry then. I'm just good afternoon and good morning. We're wrapping up with some final reflections, and we wanted to try and put together in real time some considerations that all our esteemed speakers have mentioned. So if we can go on to the next slide, I hope we have some final reflections. Great. So we wanted to add and recap on the speakers themselves, not repeating, but trying to find, and you'll see this maybe in the parts in green, where we can see some mutual cooperation activities that could take place or have taken place. So Eric gave a wonderful example of the EU-Canada cooperation that's already adopted in Estonia, and the message to give there is the need for a framework that bridges how data connects to real phenomena to interpret data correctly and avoid abstract, biased, fragmented, and context-free data. So this is extremely important, and we talked about this yesterday in the need to actually pull out best practices and use cases that can push this forward. So thank you for that, Eric. Then we moved on with Karen Jansen from the EC that underlined the fact that we don't need one data space. And also here, a set of best practices and standards on data governance and maturity models are set to be put into action. So this is an area for mutual cooperation. Diego Lopez said to consider possibilities between Europe and Canada around non-human elements, where the focus could be on discovery mechanisms, data catalogs, and metadata exchanges. I don't want to go through all of this for time reasons, but these will be available together with the slide deck. So you'll see these on here. And please correct me in the chat if anything is written here that's been not interpreted in a way that it should be. And Diego also mentioned the point around the work carrying on around within ETSI-SAREF, and maybe a consideration in the future is to make sure that a fair compliance checklist is available or is necessary for all new pilot projects. That's something that we thought might be something that could be interesting. Please indicate, anyone in the chat, if you want to add to any of these points. We go to the next slide, instead moving on to Sebastian, who's unfortunately had to leave us. I'm sorry for that, but he did underline the critical role of standardization in enabling operational data spaces, aligning with the EU Sensenelec JTC 25 and international ISO IEC. And obviously the point around trust is key around every data transaction. This comes up after in another presentation from Darrell, you'll see further along. And we have to ensure in Europe that data spaces remain transparent, reliable, and fully interoperable worldwide. So cross messages that are absolutely aligned between Europe and Canada, obviously. Daniel Alonso mentioned again, trust is I think I've repeated this. I'm sorry. I think we have two parts that are overlapping. My apologies, we'll correct that. But regarding Daniel, the action on the mutual cooperation could be to, when the standardization efforts for data spaces are taking place, the action could then be to turn them into testable standards to avoid everyone interpreting the law differently. Daryl, thank you very much and good morning to you. You pushed forward the idea of carrying out practical pilots and testbeds with international partners. You gave 4 high-level points around trust, value-driven, innovation-ready, and collaborative measures. And the joint areas could be around developing joint strategies on interoperability, mutual investment in capacity and maturity. Now, I'm going to have to apologize to Sylvia because we didn't have the chance to knock down something in real time because we were worried about getting out some of the initial survey results. So I do apologize, Sylvia. When we send out the slide deck, we'll make sure that these salient points from your presentation are included here. So if we can though go into the next slide, because some of you did put in already, and thank you for that. You are asked to come back and you asked a couple of questions that some of you delivered in real time, so thank you. The first question was, where do you see promising areas of cooperation between Europe and Canadian stakeholders and why? And here's a first initial list, okay, that you see the highlights in green. Very interesting ideas in here. I like the one on the international travel use case to clearly demonstrate the interop between the EU and Canadian digital identity with the EU digital wallet. Cryptographic standards, mutual recognition of motor vehicle safety system standards, and identity providers in interoperability. Second question was asked around what joint initiative could Europe and Canada launch to turn these into concrete cooperation actions. And a couple of points come in on to develop a shared framework addressing incentive models that would align with the EU Dataspaces and Canadian DC principles, and testbed for interoperability testing. And that is what we've come up and rustled together for these last takeaways. So there are things on here. There are things that we within INSTAR can clearly work on. What would be important is that some of the elements that are listed here are then picked up in different technical committees and working groups, but it's certainly a good basis. It's good to see the mutual areas of keywords from both Europe and Canada. And thank you very much. And maybe I'll pass back to you, Knut, for some final statements. Knut might have audio issues. What you can see in your slide is what's coming up next, and that's on Thursday the 16th. You see here the timing is on 9 to 11 EDT, 15:30, 17:30 CST timing, which is a quantum and post-quantum cryptography session. So that will be tremendously useful and extremely timely. So thank you very much. Daryl has also responded to Paul's question in the chat, so thank you for doing that as well. We'll pick up all this data and make sure we have this all together in our post-event report. Anyone would like to say anything? If not, we should wrap up here. And can we give everyone a round of applause in the chat and with the reactions? Thank you, Silvana. Oh, Knut, you're back. Great. Thank you.
Sorry, my internet here in Pisa broke down, and therefore I was lost. But thanks, you did a nice job, and there are some further ideas which I will integrate later in the report. But also thanks from my side to all the speakers Maybe it was a little bit too much to digest in 2 hours, but I think now we are on a same level what's going on here and there, and I think there is opportunity for future collaboration, as especially Daryl nicely kind of concluded in his presentation. Thank you.